second learning event in the series on thinking beyond open defecation free towards the SDGs and safely managed sanitation for all. We are following on here from a e-discussion that has been conducted over the last month on looking at moving up the sanitation ladder. This webinar is focused on the thinking about the appropriate role for government in ensuring the quality of sanitation for all, and then we will roll on into a regional workshop where we explore the particular role for government. This webinar today is conducted by the Civil Society Water and Sanitation and Hygiene Fund, supported by Australian Government's Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade. The webinar is hosted by the CS Wash Fund Management Facility, managed by Palladium International based in Brisbane, Australia. Just a bit of background on the CS Wash Fund. It finances 29 projects in 19 countries, and in South Asia it funds 9 projects. The two presentations today represent some of the projects funded by this fund in South Asia. For today's webinar, that I will do a brief presentation trying to highlight what I think are the key takeaways from the successes in eradicating open defecation in South Asia, and how I think that equips us to to move towards the Sustainable Development Goals. This will be followed by a couple of presentations from two of the projects. Firstly, Plan Pakistan. Hasnan Kazmi will present on their support for the Pakistan approach to total sanitation, and followed by a presentation from SNV in Bhutan, where Gabrielle Halcrow and Eugene Rinzin will describe the reprioritization of sanitation in Bhutan and the support of SNV towards the government of Bhutan. That will be followed by a question and answer session. To make the webinar experience the best it can for everyone involved, if you don't mind muting your mic when you're not speaking, we have the capacity to mute your mic for you, but you have a lot more control over your destiny if you are the one muting or unmuting your mic. The use of a headset improves your user experience and reduces feedback. On your dashboard, you will see that you have the capacity to raise your hand if you want to ask questions, and we will see that. You also can write questions in the question bar. This enables you to articulate your questions while the presentations are still going on, rather than having to note them down separately and capture them to be then asked at a later date. It also is seen by the presenters, and they can also start to frame a response to your question, either in the written form or verbally at the end. Functions on your GoToWebinar platform. Thank you very much. I will just pause for a minute now before going on to the first of the presentations. Thank you. Firstly, I wanted to highlight to bridge between the e-discussion and the learning event, to utilize to try and consolidate what we can learn from the achievement of ODF as fuel to move forward to the SDGs. This slide is highlighting the significant achievements of South Asia, or the countries in which the CS Wash Fund is focused on reducing open defecation versus the reduction of those without access to improved latrines. Another factor or significant contribution of South Asia was the evolution of the community-led total sanitation approach, which really was a significant shift in the way the sector has approached sanitation, away from a focus on toilets to a collective behaviour change and a focus on the goal of eradicating open defecation rather than the provision of toilets. It also enabled the evolution of local choice and multiple latrine options, prioritising with a bit of a mantra on the removal of subsidies for household sanitation, and with the prioritisation of rewards and institutional focus, if you like, on local governments. While the first three of those points essentially were born out of Bangladesh, the incentives and institutional framework were a lot more attributable, I think, to some of the experiences, again, within South Asia, in India, and looking at how to position CLTS within a institutional arrangements. Partially, I think this has contributed to an increase, a global focus on eradicating open defecation that's now reflected in the SDG. Over a little more than a decade ago, there wasn't even a discussion on open defecation or ending open defecation. It was really about the provision of toilets and the provision of sanitation rather than if you like, the first step of ending open defecation. And what we've seen is that the significance of open defecation and recording it, tracking it, and looking at its significance, it appears to have a far greater significance in terms of health outcomes than we're able to fully attribute, and that's a function of a lot of ongoing research at the moment. The e-discussion over the last month explored this idea of, once we have achieved open defecation free status, then there's still some significant challenges ahead of us. Once we've eradicated the practice of defecating in the open, then there's the question of the quality of the latrines, and are they containing feces, which is the use of improved sanitation. The question of total sanitation, which is what is happening with the fecal matter, what's happening in terms of the environment, the drains, the control of the sanitation beyond the toilet. And then the final step, if you like, is this delivering health benefits? And what we discussed over the e-discussion was the need, as you move up the sanitation ladder, to continually be shifting in focus, that open defecation is predominantly a collective, it focuses more on the collective and using the collective to drive individual behaviour change. As people, in the next step, as people have moved to improved sanitation and have moved to fixed point defecation, the next step in moving up the sanitation ladder from unimproved and shared to improved sanitation is predominantly driven by markets and consumer choice to obtain or secure higher quality and more hygienic latrines. The next is, in terms of dealing with the externalities, is predominantly a challenge, becomes more of a challenge of public services and in some ways the regulation of those public services and then the final step is ensuring that the chain is actually delivering health outcomes. And so in some ways what we want to look at is what is the role of government in all of these particular aspects of the sanitation service delivery ladder. From my perspective, I think that the most important lesson to be learnt, and the genius, if you like, behind CLTS was the fact that it managed to target what economists would call a pure public good. If I can give you a couple of definitions in economist parley, is that toilets, latrines, sewage networks, treatment plants are all private goods. They're rival and excludable, which means that someone, and I know this sounds very strange, but when someone is using a toilet, then it's not possible for someone else to be using that toilet. So it's rival in the sense that if I'm using a toilet, then no one else can use that toilet. It's excludable in that it means I can exclude, if possible, to use it and exclude someone else from it. Even sewers are rival and excludable. Rival meaning that if one person is connected, there's a little less space for someone else to connect. And excludable from a sewer, meaning that you can choose who has access to a sewer and who has not. And private goods typically are best provided by markets are delivered most efficiently by markets. There are certain conditions around which you will bring in a role for government, monopoly conditions or merit reasons, but primarily these things are best provided by markets. Versus public goods, which are non-rival and non-excludable. Non-rival, a public good is, when we say non-rival, we mean that when someone is enjoying the benefit of it, then it doesn't reduce the availability for someone else. So, for instance, an open defecation-free environment, if I'm enjoying the benefits, it doesn't mean that there's any less for someone else to enjoy the benefits. And it's non-excludable in the sense that if I am getting the benefits of it, then all those who are within that particular area are also getting the benefits. It's not possible for me to get the benefits of an open defecation-free jurisdiction while my neighbour doesn't get the benefits. And the classic examples given are street lighting, defence, military defence, clean air, but I think the genius was that open defecation-free, by definition, is a pure public good. What CLTS managed to do was to separate out if you like, the public good of targeting of focusing communities, local governments, NGOs on the provision of an open defecation-free jurisdiction, which is the core domain of government or the public sector, and really leaving open a lot the provision of the private good aspect of sanitation to the forces, market forces, local capabilities to provide those. And so I think there's a couple of key lessons I think that come out from this. I think focusing on the public good aspect is, it's not possible to achieve it unless everyone is included. So if you can't have an open defecation free jurisdiction if the poor people are still defecating in the open. And so it is also by definition, it's relatively, although measurement is it's relatively easier to measure because the exception proves the rule. You only need to find, if you like, one open defecation site to be able to declare that an area is not open defecation free, rather than having to measure 90%. Then are we statistically representative? Is it 90% or is it 93%? So nil exclusion, you know, the exception proves the rule. So in some ways it's relatively easier to measure, and it forces in inclusion of everyone. The other thing, as it's non-rival, it resists capture, in that it provides incentives for the rich to support the poor, which is one of the kind of the ideas behind is one of the building blocks on why CLTS will argue against subsidies. I've now, you know, essentially just got two slides where I essentially want to draw out what I think are the key lessons for this from this particular experience. The first is that I think that it enables us to understand that the primary role of a citizens and their government is to ensure that no one is excluded, including future generations. No one is excluded from a minimum sanitation service. That's quite separate and very, very different from the provision of services to some. What I think is significant is the provision of services, provision of sanitation services to the underserved can be done by anyone. It can be done by NGOs. The provision of services, sanitation services to the underserved can be done by households themselves. It can be done by community. It can be done by the private sector. But government is and it can be done by government. So government is also a provider of services to the underserved. But government is the only one that has the necessary legal and social authority to be able to undertake this role of ensuring that no one is excluded from a minimum sanitation service, as distinct from the multiple providers of services to some. So, and the idea here is that government has instruments that it can leverage to leverage all the other providers, whether they're NGOs, cooperatives, households, to leverage them to ensure a minimum service for all. The second principle I wanted to draw away is from the no subsidy. While I don't fully agree with the idea of CLTS that there should be no subsidies, I think one of the things that it did get right is this idea of keeping asset ownership and financing liability together. Is that if a household is going to own a latrine, then it should bear the financing liability. You don't subsidise an asset
or you don't pay for an asset that someone else is going to own and bear the liabilities for. And so I think that enables, it's quite a solid principle that by arguing for no subsidies for household latrines, the CLTS managed to pick up on, although it overstated the principle, it managed to kind of hold this principle quite tight. What I think then is that this enables the role of government to be conceptually a little more simple, where government has a role to ensure the quality of services. There are two ways that government basically can do this. If government owns the assets, then it can control the quality of the services. In the case that government doesn't control the quality of doesn't own the assets, then it has licensing or powers and social and legal powers where it can leverage the various providers who own assets to meet minimum standards. And so that enables government to be able to leverage households, to leverage the private sector, to leverage NGOs, to leverage public utilities to meet minimum service standards, and therefore use that to ensure that no one is left excluded from a minimum quality of service. So I think that's what I think, if you like, two takeaways. They're the two big takeaways, I think, from the success of the CLTS innovation, the implications for what I think are the key implications for public sector, and in some ways why I think it's been so successful. That, and I'll just reiterate them here, is that the focusing as you move up the sanitation ladder, there's a need to reorient the focus, but still the role of government as you move up the sanitation ladder, there's a clear role for government in ensuring the quality of the markets, ensuring the quality of fecal containment, and ensuring that it delivers health outcomes. That anyone can provide sanitation services to the underserved, but government is the only one that can ensure the quality and ensure the inclusiveness, to ensure that no one is excluded from a minimum sanitation service. And the final one is that, where government doesn't own assets, it still has instruments to ensure the quality of the services. Thank you very much. That's what I think are the key takeaways for us moving forward in thinking about the role of government in moving up the sanitation ladder. If it's possible, I will stop now just for any questions of clarification, and then I will throw to John. I believe Hasnain wasn't able to get online, so we will have John from Plan in Pakistan presenting. But if I could, I'll mute and pause now, and for any questions or any clarification, and we will try and keep the questions to the end. Thank you. I'm presuming that means that we're withholding question and answer to the end. And if I could then introduce John Kellner from Plan for representing Plan Pakistan on and their role in supporting the government on PATS, on the Pakistan approach to total sanitation. John, can I give the screen across to you? Are you able to take the screen?
Hi everyone. Is it all okay? Can everyone listen to me?
That's great, Hasnan.
So,
perfect.
Can I start? Okay, thank you. So, okay, my presentation is about working with government at scale to enable wider application. As some of you may already know, that Plan Pakistan is implementing CS Wash Fund project in partnership with government. Exactly, with a couple of departments are implementing partner, and we are engaging other 2 departments in collaboration. The history of Plan Pakistan wash sector engaging government starts from 2008, when government, actually Ministry of Environment and Climate Change, they have developed a core group including Plan, UNICEF and some local organization, and they formulate a Pakistan approach to total sanitation, which was adopted at national level by the federal government. And then in 2010, Pakistan faced worst in Pakistan's history of a very big flood, and later on in early recovery phase, we have started a project in collaboration with UNICEF. We call it RESFAIR. It was kind of early recovery related to water and sanitation. And we run this project in 4 provinces and 2 regions. So this is a little background of engaging government. Government was not included as implementing partner in that particular project, but that was involved in some shape of collaboration and kind of monitoring of that project. When we talk about the background, in Pakistan there were few challenges which I have listed here, and I will talk one by one about these challenges. One is policy environment. In Pakistan we have federal government, and then we have provincial government, and then local governments, which are districts and then sub-district level, and the basic tier is the union council. All these tiers have their mandate about water and sanitation and hygiene. When we talk about provincial level, because in 2012 the Parliament of Pakistan, they have passed an 18th amendment in Constitution, and they have devolved water and sanitation to the provinces. So now it is no more a federal subject, but it is a provincial subject. So the big challenge in the beginning was, because the PATS, Pakistan Approach to Total Sanitation, was adopted in the beginning by the federal government. So the first of all, it was a kind of a challenge somewhat, that the provincial government adopt the same approach at provincial level and then the local government level. So it was done in 2012 and 13. That provincial government Punjab. The project we are running in Pakistan is covering only one province, which is Punjab, the biggest one, almost 56% of the total population of Pakistan. So in Punjab, now I will be talking about Punjab only. In Punjab, there are two departments who are mainly responsible for water and sanitation. One is local government and community development department, and other is housing, urban development and public health engineering department. So there are issues that who is primarily responsible for water and sanitation and hygiene at grassroots level, especially in rural areas. There is a complex arrangement between HUD and PHED and local government and community development department. And then the local government is another tier. In sub-district level, they are also responsible for water, sanitation and hygiene. So this complexity is still going on, but now we are engaging, and I will explain in further slides that how we are engaging all those actors. The second is a weak interagency coordination. As I said, the multiple agencies are responsible for WASH, but there was no actually established forums, formal forums, I must say, for coordination. So that was another problem prior to this project. And then focus on infrastructure components rather than softer one. So prior to this project, government was only implementing hard component, infrastructure components relating to water supply, sanitation. There was no focus on hygiene at all. But the BCC component was not included and built in the WASH projects. Imbalance between investment in water supply and sanitation. If we look at the historical data of the provincial government and the local government, the more budget historically and traditionally going to water supply rather than sanitation. The ratio is around 76% water supply and then 24% to sanitation. And the sanitation is, again, it's only drainage, not wastewater treatment, and nothing on hygiene promotion. And then when we talk about weak service delivery in WASH sector, is like there are two things. One is access and other is quality of services. The access in urban areas is comparatively better, but in remote rural areas, access is a problem. Especially in southern part of Punjab, the access to these basic water and sanitation services is very poor. And then the quality is another thing, because most of the government-led schemes, they did not have community involved. So even the water supply scheme, which are mainly developed by public health engineering department and then handed over to the community, 76% of those, 92% of those water supply schemes were stopped, were not functioning after between 1 and 2 years time when they were handed over to the community, because the community mobilization component was missing. So this was the scenario when we started CS WASH Fund project in 2013. But we actually decided to take it as a challenge and involve the government in project implementation because of our learning from the earlier project which we had in 33 districts and covered 7 million population. The challenge in that project we faced by the end was that once we completed the project and phase out and hand it over to some agency to continue and sustain what is already achieved. Like in that project we made 6.4 million population ODF, but the challenge was to continue and sustain what was achieved. But the local implementing CSOs were already phasing out because the lot of operational cost and HR and all that was involved, so they could not continue their project as their own. So we think that it is only government which will remain in the area for the longer term. And another thing is the right based. It is the government responsibility to provide those services, not the CSOs on the longer term. So we decided to engage government and take this challenge. So we go for government-led approach. That government should take ownership what we are doing, and they should continue. They should build in their own program, because the PACS approach was already adopted by the provincial government. And the second thing is that trust in the government capacities and develop where they are lacking. So what we did is that we sit with the government and see what there are institutional arrangements already available, and what are their existing capacities and where they are lacking. So we provide not only the trainings to the government, but we already also provide them the staff where they need some skilled people on supervisory role and also at the field level. And then both at provincial and district level, we developed formal coordination forum where different agencies sit together, including Public Health Engineering Department, Local Government and Community Development Department, Planning and Development Department, Health Department and Education Department, which are the key stakeholders in WASH sector in Pakistan. So these forums were not only developed at provincial level, but also at the district level, and now we are in process of forming these forums at Union Council level, which is the very basic tier of local government. So these formal coordination forum help to not only to discuss, but also to make joint plans to resolve those problems, and taking on board all local level and the provincial level stakeholders. Like in local level, we have secretary union councils who is responsible for a cluster of villages around population of 25,000, and then we have village level. Health department has a structure of lady health visitor, which are responsible for like 2 to 300 household, and they go door to door on regular basis and provide them education and conduct session. Initially, they were responsible for maternal health, and then we engaged them and included hygiene messages and sanitation messages in their curriculum. So now they are going with enhanced messages with WASH agenda also to the household level. And then Public Health Engineering Department has their setup at district level with community-based motivators, and we included another tier in our project, like field coordinator, to supervise those community-based motivators and consolidated the lessons and learnings and develop case studies for further application and all that. And in a result of all these, the government of Punjab, they have developed a Punjab WASH sector development plan in 2014, which is for 10 years, 2014 to 2024. They set the target, and first time in Punjab they took WASH as a prevention side of the health. And it is then another document which I would like to refer is Punjab Growth Strategy. Now WASH is included in Punjab Growth Strategy as well as part of health, and they recognize WASH as preventive side of the health. And then based on all these, the government of Punjab owned and they scaled up PATS project in Punjab with their own funding. It was first time in the history of Punjab that the government allocated funds for softer side as well. because of the argument that the people themselves, they are spending a lot, vis-a-vis government spending is not more than 8%, because the people are building their own latrine on self-help basis with no subsidy provided by the government. So this project is now run by the government itself, is now in the second year, and government is happy with the result they initially got, and they are willing to continue with their own funding. So this is just a glimpse of the capacity building of the government. We took the government guys and at the grassroots level, at district level, and then trained them as trainer to replicate those training on CLTS and SLTS at village level. And then the joint planning interviews. They sit with the government, the different departments, including public health engineering department, local government department, and health department, and made joint plan. And then on quarterly basis and with some department on biannual basis, we review those plans and then made planning for the upcoming months. So it creates a big ownership not only at the provincial level but the district level as well. And then at district level we have a head which is called district coordination officer. So at the moment we targeted 164 villages, and out of those 164 villages, 149 villages are already certified as ODF, and for appreciation the district coordination officer awarded the shields and they installed the board on those villages. So they for demand creation. Now there is a demand for further villages, the neighboring villages, they also want to become ODF. So almost 50% of like social mobilization for those villages, for those neighboring villages is already done. And then the local government department, because they have presence at the village level, at union council level, so they are also running a project which is in 7 districts, and they are covering like 1.4 million population, and they are getting collaboration from the revenue department as well, because revenue department has access at the sub village level as well. So we are involving all stakeholders up to the village level to get these things done, because in a very cost effective manner. So what are the key outcomes after 3 years of the project we have implemented? And the government departments are now able to respond as per their mandate for WASH. Not 100%, but the service delivery level is substantially enhanced, and the evidence is we have a midterm evaluation of our project last year, and that is a big evidence for this claim. Hygiene promotion is built in into infrastructure programs. It is not only by under this project which we are running, but now the government is allocating substantial funds wherever they are implementing their water and sanitation projects. So hygiene component is now part and parcel. Last year and year 2013, 14-15 and 15-16, local government department allocated like 20,000 Pakistani rupees, which is like $200 for each union council in Punjab, which is, we have like 4,500 union councils in Punjab. So they instructed every union council to allocate like $200 for every union council for hygiene promotion only. It is small amount, but it is first time and it is good for beginning. And then $2,000 US dollars at sub-district level they have allocated. And now they are requesting development agencies, CSOs, to guide them how to spend that money, and they are clubbing this amount with external funding like some other CSOs doing, so they are doing it jointly. with those local organizations. Government initiated and funded sanitation scale-up program based on learning. As I told, government started its own funded project starting from 2014-15, and it's still going. And actually, overfunded project, the CS Wash funded project was running only in 4 districts, but the government is upscaled this project in 36 districts of the Punjab with their own funding. Interdepartmental coordination strengthened and formalized. As I said, at provincial level, under the chairship of Planning and Development Department, government has formed a provincial wash coordination forum, and which is devolved at the district level also in the chairship of a district coordination officer. And all relevant departments are part of this provincial and district level coordination forum. And at provincial level, this forum has produced Punjab Wash Sector Development Plan, which I just talked about earlier. The key learnings and the takeaways, I will say, from this presentation are working with the government to identify key gaps and using NGOs' capabilities to address these within government systems. We understand that the government has some capacity gaps and we have also some limitation. So why don't we sit together and we share what we have with the government, and using government capacities and their access, which is at the grassroots level, and they have a lot of resources as compared to the CSOs, using them, so putting our capacities and their resources and their access together for the mutual good. And starting small, not expecting overnight success, and building, scaling up as capacity develops. Yeah, it is very important because, you know, when we are working with CSOs, things goes faster. You know, you can quickly implement things as you plan. But with the government, things are comparatively slow, and somewhat it is difficult to change the stereotyping, ongoing stereotyping with the government people have. But it is more sustainable, and you know, the scale, if you can dent the government existing policies and build in what you have, so the scale is you know, very high, and you can reach out to more people. So this was a key learning that we had, and successfully implemented. The other thing which we are somewhat lacking is that we in previous 3.5 years we have been more working with the government functionaries, and we think that it's a time to engage elected representatives at provincial level. And now we have local government elections last year in Pakistan, in Punjab. We need to engage them as well. So we have a strategy to engage both at provincial level and the local level. But the bottleneck in this, that after every 5 years the people change, and then you have to start all that advocacy once again. But still, it is very useful if like a provincial minister at provincial level talk about wash agenda in the provincial assembly. It has more impact than the government functionary, because they have limited powers. So our next target is to build more advocacy with the elected representative both at provincial and the district levels. Thank you.
Thank you, Hassan. Much appreciated. Yes, I will. Again, that's a very good point. Let's open it up for any couple of questions of clarification, and then we'll do the major question and answer at the end. Thank you, Hassan. So, any questions from? I see there's a couple of questions on the coming in on on the tab. Any other questions people want to answer at this point? Right. All right. Thank you, Hasnan. Thank you very much. I think you like I think the highlighting the 18th constitutional amendment, the clarification of the role with the provinces, and then it sounds as though What Plan has done a lot at the sub-provincial level of helping the government to coordinate the sanitation approach, not necessarily so much financing of sanitation, but actually coordinating and mobilising has been a great value added, especially with the local governments. There's a couple of questions coming in for you on the chat screen too, Hasnan. So we'll come back to those later.
So should I respond to those questions right now or later on?
Later on, please, Hasnan. Now, if I can, we will go across to Eugen and Gabrielle in Bhutan. Gabrielle, are you able to take over the screen?
I am, thank you, Mark.
Wonderful,
okay.
Wonderful, thanks.
I'll just close the screen. Thank you very much. My name is Gabrielle and I'm with Eugen Rinzin with SNV Bhutan. We wanted to share our experiences of working with the Royal Government of Bhutan as the duty bearer for the rights to sanitation and water in terms of developing a national approach over the last 8 years. And very much in Bhutan, we're starting from that second step of the ladder that you showed, Mark, in terms of the basic sanitation coverage is very high, and trying to reprioritize sanitation in a sector and a context where it was very much seen as solved. Starting from having a look at the data, if you can see for the JMP, basic sanitation is very high and open defecation is very low. And this is historically in Bhutan, the data hasn't differentiated between basic, shared, improved, and concepts of hygienic usage. So coverage was always seen as very high, and that is reflected in the reports by the government to Sakasan in the beginning years. With very low levels of open defecation, sanitation wasn't really seen as an issue. It wasn't reflected in the national targets or plans or budgets. And as such, you were seeing throughout the MDGs period that there wasn't very much progress reported in terms of improved sanitation. However, within the Ministry of Health, they weren't seeing the health outcomes that you would expect to see from such high levels of basic sanitation. Bhutan remained with one of the highest rates of stunting within the South Asia region, and in areas where sanitation was the lowest, for example in the east, it was reported as high as 41%. And we were seeing at the time that more than 30% of the cases being reported to the basic health services were actually linked to that poor sanitation and hygiene. So very much the issue was related to the quality of that basic sanitation, hygienic issues, and also the low emphasis on hygiene practices. And in recognition of this, the Ministry of Health requested SNV in 2008 to work with them in a 5-year agreement to develop a dedicated approach to sanitation within Bhutan. And this is what we'd like to share in this presentation. In terms of the context, this is something that is probably familiar within the region. Sanitation, historically, rural water supply and sanitation in Bhutan started in the 70s, and it was very much an add-on to the existing water supply programs. Sanitation at the time was seen as something to be subsidized and as an add-on activity. In the early 90s, though, in recognition of the issues with subsidizing and slow progress, the King of Bhutan issued a decree that every household should have at least a basic toilet. And that led to a really rapid uptake. Very committed health workers, house to house, encouraged all the households to build a very basic toilet. And that led to the coverage going up to 90% during the 90s. In 2000, we had our first sector policy. But again, that was very much focused on rural water supply, and sanitation was literally one paragraph within that policy, and which led us to 2008 with the beginning of a pilot dedicated sanitation program for the country. That was done through a testing phase, which we'll talk about next, but then leading to an actual endorsed national program by 2011. So basically, until that point, sanitation wasn't really reflected. There's not a big sector in Bhutan. There is not active CSOs necessarily. So how do you actually move a program forward where you actually have a sense that sanitation is solved? The first steps in developing, we started, as the last presenter showed, we started very small with a pilot in 4 sub-districts across the country in very different contexts, from the very high plains bordering Tibet down to the lowlands of India. And the idea was to try and look at what we could do to introduce some more technology options beyond basic pit latrines, which were the common ones you were seeing, and also work with the existing community development for health approaches, which have been focused on, they're very much based on FAST and developing community management and participation, but focused on rural water supply. So we tried to look at how we could change that towards sanitation. And as part of that, there was a learning trip to Bangladesh at the time to have a look at CLTS and see what could be learnt and applicable. It wasn't adapted within Bhutan for a number of reasons, but it's also partly because open defecation wasn't the issue. It was actually about trying to move towards improved sanitation, and the village setup is such that it's not such a collective action movement. But very much in the beginning, it was very small steps, and I would say it was also very small progress. One of the big lessons that we've had is that you have to basically get a certain level of economy of scale in sanitation to actually get that progress, which led us to our second stage, which was going district-wide. At the beginning of the last phase of the CSWAS Fund, we took the program and tried to go across an entire district twice. And very much we tried to develop an integrated program. It is based on SMB's Sustainable Sanitation and Hygiene for All program, which really tries to integrate demand creation with supply chains, with wash governance and behaviour change communication. And we supported the Ministry of Health through a series of regional exposures and knowledge events to try and pick up what the region was learning around, for example, sanitation marketing, and also working on supply chain work. As I mentioned, we basically, at this point, we really reached an economy of scale where we saw progress picking up. And it was very much a turning point. We reached a point where it was proof of concept. We had the first sub-district declared in Bhutan in 2011, and not declared as open defecation free. As I said, that's not the language used here, but very much 100% access to improved sanitation without subsidy. In those two test districts, they're now both at 99% access to improved sanitation. And this proof of concept really gave the Ministry of Health the confidence to endorse the model. So that program model is now the national program model. To start policy consultations to have a dedicated rural sanitation policy. It led to the first targets being set within the 5-year plan, and also, really importantly, it led to a dedicated rural sanitation and hygiene program team within the Ministry of Health, which was really the first time we'd had dedicated staff working for sanitation. With that, I'd like to hand over to Ugen Rinzin to talk about the current phase and the changing roles within it.
Thank you, Gabriel. I'll just continue with the presentation. So with the national targets being set, it has placed responsibility on the district to progress sanitation, and also pressure on the Public Health Engineering Division of the Ministry of Health to be able to support rest of the 18 districts technically with just 3 staff. So the next phase under another 5 year with SNV looked at capacity building related to the elements of the scaling up. So the elements that we have is the enabling environment, which talks about the policy, guidelines, monitoring system, and strategy. And the what component of element, getting the program cycles and tools in order, and whom, trying to bring in more players, and PHE taking lead, And we are also further testing and innovating with 2 more targeted districts. On the what slide, the process we use has resulted in a very clear program model and a cycle for rural sanitation and hygiene program. This enabled PHED to take the lead in ensuring a harmonized approach consistently across the rural sanitation and hygiene program, as more actors were facilitated to come on board. For example, we have UNICEF, who started supporting Public Health Engineering Division. They were asked to align with this, and SNB also provided technical support to backstop the Public Health Engineering Division. So on this slide, we have whom who are like engaged in the scaling up. We are asking who leads, who implements, and who supports. Has brought in a number of actors with different roles. Sanitation is now no longer just PHED, and in turn PHED now sees the role in steering and leading. Now with the formulation of the WASH cluster this year, there is now representations from the program development partners like UNICEF, SNV, local partners. We have Royal Society for Protection of Nature and Tarayana, the Women Council, the Disabled People Association, other ministries like Education, Religion and Health, and other parts of Ministry of Health divisions, and also the private sectors. It has now gone from a party of 2 to a sector in development with PHED leading the program. This talks about the current coverage of the program. Scaling strategy has both vertical, that is by bringing in more partners to replicate district level in alignment, and horizontal scaling with SNV support to institutionalizing, developing the strategies and tools at national level. Some districts are in different phases requiring different support. For example, we have Hinsi, where we have implemented the program. Here we have some data. Access to data has now improved, and it is now able to support the decision making at the government and also at the private level. Improved sanitation trend is now visibly increasing, and stunting in the eastern region, which we have reported very high, is decreasing. Several sub-districts have now declared, and the government is confident in meeting their first 5-year plan targets. But this is much more to go, and the challenge is not to lose the depth in the breadth. Now we have what we need to focus currently. It's about national monitoring system strengthening, and also to maintain the focus on improved access whilst broadening to universal coverage and SDG goals. We are also focusing on the equity and inclusion. Also institutionalizing and not only replicating, prioritizing investment in hand washing with soap alongside the sanitation program, adjusting approach for district after 100% improved access, and also on the financing the sector. That's a challenge here. And also we are focusing on the emerging issues like fecal sludge management in small towns and safely managed in the rural areas. And another emerging issue is on the menstrual hygiene management and informal settlements. We would like to actually thank, here you can see some team pictures, many different people who make up the program. This photo includes Public Health Engineering Division staff, SNV, and we have a local capacity builder called LNW and other local partners.
With that, Mark, we'll hand it back to you now.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Gabrielle and Eugen. That's a great follow-on, I think, from on the idea of not necessarily trying to hit with a CLTS sledgehammer where it's not appropriate, of tailoring a response to a particular context and really going into the market side. So that's excellent, and I think gives a lot for other countries who are not as far up the sanitation ladder in the region to learn from. Can I again ask for any questions to Gabrielle and Eugen specifically? And then I will open it up, and I see a few here for Hasnan and a few other questions, a good one from Sam as well. I will, any others specifically of clarification for Eugen and Gabrielle? All right. I'm presuming, Sam, I'm presuming your audio is all good to go. Would you mind, you had a good question earlier, and I don't have the answer to it, but I think if you can throw that question to the forum, maybe other people have thoughts on that too. Thanks, Sam.
Oh, hi, Mark. Thanks. My question really was, I was impressed by the level of buy-in from the government, particularly in Pakistan, and I wanted to know what the Pakistan guys had done to achieve such buy-in from the government, because our colleagues from Africa speak of challenges in terms of government buy-in, several challenges that are really at different levels in trying to, involve government in implementing the CSO Watch project.
Can you respond, Mark?
Sorry, yes, please, Hasnan, please go.
Actually, as I explained in my presentation also, we didn't try to sell anything which is ours to the government. What we did in the beginning is we convinced government to formulate a forum, a task force which can develop a mutual approach which is specified to Pakistan. So in 2008, government formulated a forum which is included by different agencies, and government was very much part of it. And through very long process, it took like 2 years to develop this Pakistan approach to total sanitation. So the first thing is, we are not trying to sell anything which is ours to the government. Now, we say that this is approach which is developed by yourself, and you have adopted it, you have approved it through the different forum. It was approved by the Prime Minister that time in 2008, because water and sanitation was part of federal, under the federal government that time. So now, when we meet the government, we say that this is your approach and we are here, we just want you to replicate and apply that approach which is already approved by yourself. So sometimes, you know, it is difficult to be that much patient under the project arrangements, because projects are time bound. You are running against the time all the time. You have targets and you have your, but we have a WASH program in Pakistan, so we took it a long agenda, and we have been striving for this. So finally, it was adopted and approved by the government in 2010. But there was another challenge, because in 2012, the federal parliament approved the 18th Amendment and devolved WASH to the provinces. So the other challenge was to convince province to adopt the federal approach at provincial level. So it didn't took so much time, so it was comparatively easier because it was already approved by the federal government. So the point is, the point I wanted to make is that we never try to sell anything which is ours. Like we never tried to sell CLTS to the government, but we evolved PATS, Pakistan Total Sanitation, and then we sold it to the government. So they stand accountable because this approach is already adopted and approved by themselves, not by us. So this was the key. Did I make
Thank you, Hasnan. Thank you, Hasnan. That was very, very clear. Sam, is that okay?
Yes, that was very clear. Thank you very much for that explanation. Thanks.
There was there was another question, really one regarding the fact that communal sanitation under the JMP is not classified as unimproved. Under communal sanitation under JMP is classified as unimproved, yet Joseph raised the question why communal sanitation is sometimes a very good form of sanitation. Why can't it be included? I don't know the answer to that, and the SDGs, I suspect it's got a question to do with the SDGs about what is safe sanitation and what is not. Does anyone have an answer to that question? Can they, any ideas about that question of including good communal sanitation versus just excluding communal sanitation? Andrew, please, your thoughts on that one.
Mark?
Yes, please.
Yeah, Andrew Jelansky from World Vision. Yeah, I think it's based on just a lot of research that the WHO have done over the years of communal toilets, and they just found that it starts off okay. They're being maintained and operated properly, but after a while, the system falls down, and there's just not good governance in relation to those type of toilets. So they've labelled it as an unimproved system.
Agreed. And I think the question is, how do we, with the SDG monitoring, completely agree, how do we go beyond that to not just exclude them all, but to untangle the good communal sanitation from the bad communal sanitation, rather than just put a line through them all? And is there any way of doing that? Any thoughts on that? That I think was the essence of the question that was raised.
Yeah, I think somebody answered with there's a model in India that's been quite successful, and we're actually using it in Zimbabwe and really closely monitoring that, and hopefully we'll write up a case study soon about it, just to show that it is possible. But we need to obviously gather more evidence on that.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think there are a few, I think the pay-for-use model, by and large, pay-for-use or some kind of cross-subsidised by high-traffic areas into poor communities. I think there's a range, and it may be something that the SDGs are going to try and monitor rather than just saying, communal is out. And potentially a role for government there in, irrespective of whether it's a community toilet or a private toilet or an NGO toilet, monitoring the quality, which I think is kind of that final level of the SDG ladder. Thanks, Andrew. It's a really good one, and I don't know the answer to that one, how that one is going to be reclassified. Any other comments, questions for? I saw there was a couple more for Hasnan. One around federal government subsidies for local. Are there federal government funding coming to provinces or to local governments? Hasnan, would you mind responding to that?
Yeah, actually I have responded in writing, but I can repeat it. It is actually provincial government, Punjab, which is funded this project. It is around 4 billion per annum, and now it is in the second year. And the subsidy question for the same was it is only for one provincial government or the other. So I'm talking about only one provincial government. The other provincial government also have similar program, but those are donor funded. The uniqueness of Punjab is here provincial government has allocated funds part of their own development program. It is not donor funding. So the success is that the government has first time not only adopted but contributed in terms of money to this program. Is it enough?
Right. And I understand that it's predominantly, Hasnan, and I'll also throw the question across to Gabrielle and Eugen as well, as a clarification on what is the government funding. Is it predominantly coordination, mobilisation, promotion, and the sense I had was that there was a withdrawal from hard subsidies for household sanitation. Would you mind clarifying that?
Yeah, thank you. Actually, there is no subsidy. The funding is for mobilizations, SLTS, CLTS triggering. It is on HR, and the trainings. Actually, in fact, it is the same project which we are implementing from the funding of CS. Government has upscaled the same project in 36 and in fact with the same name. So it is kind of total adaptation of the approach which we are implementing, because we run that project in first 2 years and then government pick it up and upscale up to 36 districts. So now we are implementing CS Wash Fund project in 4 districts, but government is also taking additional geographical area in those 4 districts also and upscale in other 32 districts. So it does not include subsidies. It is total soft component.
Great. Thank you, Hasnan. Eugen, Gabrielle, would you mind responding to the same question?
Yes, Ms. Gabrielle here. In Bhutan, the subsidies ended in the 90s. So when, in terms of where the funding comes from and what the government funding is spent on, very much Bhutan is going through a decentralization process. So the work that we've done in terms of getting targets and guidelines within the 5-year plans means that at the district, so the subnational level, when they make their programs and allocate their own budgets, they have to allocate an amount to sanitation. So previously it was coming from national government and there was not a targeted or earmarked sanitation fund. It was only if it was identified as a priority. But now the work is very much trying to, by having it there in the targets and having clear guidance from the policy and the guidelines to the program, the idea is that the districts, to achieve their targets, they need to allocate part of their own existing budgets towards it, and that is around running these workshops, the training, the monitoring, the activities. It's certainly not uniform across all the districts yet, and a big part of it is, unless the guidance is there from the national level, the districts will allocate a budget, and then the risk is it can end up being spent on subsidised toilets or things that are not aligned with it. So we've been trying very much to work out the costing for the programs and have a look at how much investment needs to be made by the districts, but unless there is the support to the districts on how to use their budgets, it can be a lost opportunity.
Right. So managing the risks of, funding going AWOL or, not aligning with the broader objectives of the program.
Yeah, it's one thing to have the success in getting the budgets allocated and earmarked for sanitation at the sub-district level, but then it's also the support to make sure it is spent how you would hope it would be spent sustainably.
Wonderful. I've noticed everyone's muted. I'm unmuting everyone so you're in control of your own buttons. Hopefully that enables it, makes it easier for you to raise questions. Now, so if you wouldn't mind muting your own buttons at your own convenience, but any further questions for Gabrielle and Eugen or Hasnain? All right. I don't think there's. I had one other question for. Sorry, am I cutting someone off? Okay. I had another question for Eugen and Gabrielle on their how they're supporting markets, financing, access to credit. Would you mind talking a little bit more about how government works in terms of facilitating market access and beyond just mobilisation and workshops, and how, in Bangladesh there's microcredit, if that's a factor in Bhutan? Would you mind just responding to those questions in relation to the market and government's role in interfacing with the market?
Yeah, definitely. Part of it, within the national program, there was a series of supply chain studies across the country to understand what the blockages were. Very much in Bhutan, everything is imported, so all the pans and the pipes are coming from over the border in India. And it was having a look at, so what can be done to increase the access to the more remote areas. The findings from the supply chain studies led to guidelines, which talked about how supply chain through product bundling, and that's very much PHCD trying to convince the local market within Bhutan to play a role within it. It's not regulated as such because it's a very small thing at the moment. Everyone is basically constructing the toilets themselves, and it's really the pans that are coming in over the border. And that is regulated, what comes over the border, and it's taxed as well. In terms of the financing side of it for the private sector, from the household side, as it's non-subsidy, there was a piece of research that we did that tried to understand if affordability actually was the barrier. And for the more vulnerable households, it wasn't. It was actually an issue around access to labour, so for the female-headed households. And that is something that at the local level is managed by the government in terms of mobilising volunteer labour, which is something that is a common practice within Bhutan. So in terms of the regulation side of the private sector, it's a very small private sector, and most of it is actually happening outside of the country. So it is really about trying to just make sure that what is coming into the country is supported to reach the most remote areas, if that answers the question.
Lovely, Ulek. And I think it's interesting how often it's, it's not necessarily financial, it's not the actual financial burden, but a range of constraints around the financing. I think it's and the motivation rather than, and those constraints rather than actual hard cash for purchasing latrines. That is a really nice understanding, I think, that I've noticed in other contexts as well. Thank you, Gabrielle. Any other questions from that people would like to raise? Great. Well, for those of you that we haven't heard from, I hope that this has been useful. If there's any further questions or queries, or any further comments that Gabrielle, Eugen, Hasnan, would you like to make any final closing, any things that you would like to clarify, any final conclusions before we wrap up?
Hi, this is Jad from World Vision Sri Lanka. Hi, Mark.
Gerald, lovely to hear from you. Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah. Yes, my question is to plan Pakistan regarding the fiscal transfer mechanisms. So, if you have any experience to the mechanisms called fiscal transfer mechanism to transfer fund to government and implement the sanitation project through their finance contributions?
We don't have this. Maybe if you can unpack this term, fiscal transfer mechanism, then I can make.
The fiscal transfer in Sri Lanka, with the province called one of the part of government, so we transfer funds to projects. Let's say we contribute the fund like a 80% budget, total budget, then they are contributing 20% budget. So, but finally they are implementing the project in the so just we are monitoring that. So but we have some experience on that, but I want to listen from you also. You have like experience on the Pakistan also.
Yeah. Actually, the project which is funded by DFAT, CS Watch Fund project, it is totally implemented by the government. So we are transferring funds to the government, couple of departments, Community Development Department, another is Public Health Engineering Department, and they are implementing that project. But that project is 100% funded by plan and fund provided by DPAD.
Okay.
And then government has allocated its own resources to scale the same project. They are not actually, it is not kind of component sharing, but the other thing is we are not providing anything to the government in terms of their operational cost, and only for some funds for vehicle POL and maintenance, etc. And then we have provided some additional staff. But the 100% staff is not funded by the project because they already had staff on their own payroll. So we have just kind of gap filling things in that project. So in that term, you can say that it is jointly funded, but not in terms of cash. Government is funding that project, but they have upscaled that project in with their own money.
Oh, well, thank you so much.
And an additional thing, there was a question earlier from Joseph about this manufacturing. In Punjab, government tried to work with manufacturer to explore some new ideas of low-cost sanitation pans, but unfortunately, the low-cost sanitation pan were not acceptable by the community. So they stick with the old pans, which are not actually low cost, but somewhat people afford it, and in some very poor of the poorest, and then some disables and all that. So we have provided some subsidies in the end of the project after the village was declared ODF certified.
Great, thanks, Hasnan. Is that has that got all of your queries there, Jaya?
Yeah, thank you, Mark. Yes, I got it. Thank you.
Wonderful. All right. Thank you, everyone. I hope this has been useful. Gabrielle, Eugen, any last word from your side?
Thank you very much. That's all.
Great. Thanks, everyone, and I hope this has been useful, and we trust that we can learn from it, and I think especially some of the lessons the countries that are higher up the ladder have got. Sri Lanka and Bhutan potentially have a lot we can learn from in the rest of South Asia. Thank you all very much. Bye-bye.